God has spoke to us, given to us direction, instruction. Like Timothy, having been taught by Paul, God is teaching us of his ways, of his principles, and of those things which draw us closer to him and bring us into a relationship with him. Today he speaks to us about prayer, the necessity of prayer, but it also tells us about the kind of prayer that he is looking for from us. If we only look at the scriptures, many times we sometimes think we know what he's talking about, but in reality it's not what he wants, it's what we think he wants. Let's go back to the Old Testament to begin to lay a foundation for what God wants to speak to us today. We have the story of Jacob. And here's a story that's very interesting and very important to us to understand. Go back a little further. Isaac and Rebekah. These were his parents. Rebekah was barren. She had no children. Isaac prays for her. And she conceives and brings forth twins. Not just one. Twins. It's like, okay, we're going to make this all up at one time. So he gets twins. The birth of the twins is very unique because Esau was born first, but when he came forth from the womb, Jacob was holding on to his heel. And so you could hardly say that one was born before the other, because it was a consistency, it was a complete flow in birth. But Esau was the firstborn. But there was a prophecy that came to Rebekah. And God told her that the older son would serve the younger son, even though that should not have been the way it was, because there was the birth of Esau first. Esau was a hairy man. He was a rough character, whereas Jacob was more what we would call today refined. He was more domestic than his brother. However, there came a time when, as they grew up, Jacob was doing the things that he would do, it's his responsibility, and didn't necessarily mean that Rebekah would do all the cooking, because they would share whatever they had, because they didn't always cook at the same time or wherever they were. Jacob had made some soup, some broth, and Esau had been out in the field and doing his work with the cattle and with the sheep. And he was hungry. He was very hungry. And when he came in, as he came to the house, he smelled the soup cooking. And it just obviously affected him very much, because he came to Jacob and he said, I want some soup. Well, you know, brothers, there's always this turmoil between brothers normally. One trying to get something from the other. And Jacob said to him, okay, I'll give you soup, but let's make a deal. And Esau agreed to give his birthright. Being the first, he gave Jacob his birthright. Now, this would be a legitimate transaction, because it was a free will offering of Esau in order to have something to eat. He allowed his smell to control him. Remember, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, the 5 different brothers, and how that we are controlled by these things in our life. The smell affected him and his feeling. He was hungry. Well, this was taken care of. But as it came time for Isaac to die, Isaac called Esau, who was the firstborn, and he said to him, go out and kill an animal and fix something for me to eat, and when you bring it back, then I will give you your blessing as the firstborn son. Isaac, didn't know the agreement they had made between them, obviously. But the wife, Rebekah, heard Isaac tell Esau he's going to bless him. Well, she was very protective of Jacob. You know how sometimes mothers will protect one son above another or one child above another. Well, this was the way that Rebekah was with Jacob. So she went to Jacob and said, Jacob, we got a problem. Your father is going to bless Esau, and the blessing belongs to you. You go out and you kill a lamb or a sheep and make soup from it, and you can take it to your father and he will bless you if you get there first. And Jacob said, but Mom, now these are language that we use today, not necessarily the way they would do. Mom, I'm smooth skinned. I'm not hairy like my brother. I'm sophisticated. And the mother said, don't worry, we'll fix it. So he went, he killed the lamb, he brought the food, and the mother took the skin of the lamb, put it on his arms, so that his arms were hairy. Well, he went in then to the father, and he pretended that he was Esau. And the father said, you know, you feel like him, but you don't smell like him. You didn't smell like the wild animals of the field. But he said, okay. So he ate the food. When he finished, he blessed Jacob with the firstborn blessing. In our language today, and even in scriptural context, this was deception. It was deception. They deceived the father, Isaac. When Esau came home and found out the father had already blessed Jacob, he was angry because he thought the blessing still belonged to him. He obviously forgot about, the soup, and he didn't want to remember it, maybe. It was something that was temporary. He should have done it, but he did. Therefore, Jacob had to leave. He had to run because Esau was going to kill him. So he went to the mother's brother, Laban, and there he found a young lady that he would like for his wife. He saw Rachel, and so he goes to the father, Laban, and he says, I want to marry Rachel. I want her for my wife. The father says, okay, that's good. We're willing to do that. But you have to work for 7 years first in order to get her for your wife. Well, obviously he was one that was very caught up in the relationship with Rachel, and he was willing to work 7 years to get her. At the end of 7 years, he went to Laban and he said to him, okay, 7 years has passed. Now I want Rachel for my wife. So they set up the festivities, they had the celebration, and when they went to their tent or their room or whatever it was, when the father was to send Rachel, instead he sent Leah, her sister. In my understanding or my thinking, I think, what do you mean? Jacob didn't know it was not the one he wanted? Well, very possibly because they didn't have Morocco. He couldn't see in the dark who it was. It's a female, yes, he knows it's a female, but he doesn't know which one female it is. And so they consummate the marriage. In the morning when he wakes up, it's not Rachel beside him, it's Leah. Whoa, he runs out and he gets the father and he says, what is this? You gave me the wrong woman. I've consummated this marriage with the wrong woman. And the father says to him, we have a tradition. The oldest must marry first. So I had to do this. You had to take the older one, because otherwise she would not be able to get married. It was custom to them. But he was disappointed. But he still wanted Rachel. And so he talks to Laban, and they come up with this deal. He can have her also for a wife, but he has to work 7 years more before he can have her for the wife. He works now, this is 14 years for the one he wants. He gets her. Now, we think, but this was deception. Yes, but remember, he deceived his father. What you do comes back upon you. So what he got, obviously he understood it was his fault. So he worked for the 14 years to get the wife he wanted. After getting Rachel, he works another 7 years for Laban. And then he decides, it's time for us to go back to where we came from. For him to go back. He talks to the father. They agree they can go. But they also had some other agreements, and I won't go into all of them because it would take too long to go through the whole story. Came time for them to go, but when it was time to them